Hi, Reddit. I'm still shaking, reeling, really, from what happened at dinner tonight. It feels like my life just imploded, detonated right there between the roast chicken and the mashed potatoes. I'm Olivia Bennett, 42, or I guess, soon not to be Bennett. I work part-time as a paralegal for a small estate planning firm here in Bethesda, a job I returned to a few years ago once the kids got older. It keeps my mind sharp, utilizes the skills from before I became a full-time mom. My husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, I guess I need to start saying, is Richard Bennett, 44, a corporate lawyer, the successful kind. Charming when he needs to be, sharp, knows how to navigate contracts and loopholes with an unnerving smoothness. We've been married 17 years, 2 kids, Emily and Jake, both navigating the treacherous waters of high school. From the outside, picture perfect suburban life. Inside? Well, the cracks had been forming for a while. I just hadn't realized how deep they went, or what lay beneath. It all came crashing down tonight. Wednesday, roast chicken night. I remember because Emily was complaining, again, that I'd forgotten the garlic bread. I was in the kitchen, finishing the potatoes, the familiar rhythm of dinner prep usually a comfort. The kids were upstairs, the sounds of their typical sibling bickering muffled. Richard was home, unusually early, already swirling a glass of that ridiculously overpriced Merlot his mother, Margaret, had brought back from her Napa trip. Ah, Margaret. She'd been staying with us for over a week, ostensibly to help out, while recovering from a minor elective surgery, which seemed remarkably non-debilitating. In reality, she was hovering, judging the dust on the bookshelves, rearranging my spice rack alphabetically, offering passive-aggressive advice on everything from my parenting choices. Are you sure Emily should be spending so much time on that art project, dear? Doesn't she have AP exams? To my cooking. A lovely chicken, Olivia, though perhaps a touch dry this time? Richard, as usual, seemed oblivious, or perhaps chose to be, basking in her maternal attention. It set my teeth on edge, but I played the polite daughter-in-law, just like I always did. Then the doorbell rang. Odd for a weeknight. Wiping my hands on my apron, I went to answer it. A man stood on the porch, mid-40s, maybe, clean cut, wearing a well-tailored suit that screamed lawyer, holding a sleek briefcase. "Good evening," he said politely, his eyes professional, unreadable. "I'm looking for Olivia Bennett." "That's me," I replied, a sudden, inexplicable knot tightening in my stomach. He gave a small nod, not offering a handshake, and immediately opened his briefcase right there on the welcome mat. "I'm Daniel Harper from Harper and Associates. I have some documents that require your immediate attention and signature, Mrs. Bennett." "Documents? What documents? Is something wrong?" My mind raced. Unpaid bill? Lawsuit against Richard's firm? He didn't answer directly, just held out a thick legal-sized envelope. I took it numbly, stepping back to let him inside, the envelope suddenly feeling ice-cold in my hands despite the warmth of the house. Richard appeared in the hallway behind me, swirling his wine glass, an unnervingly calm expression on his face. Too calm. "Ah, Daniel, you made good time," he said smoothly. "What's going on, Richard?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, looking between my husband and the strange lawyer. Richard gestured towards the dining room with his glass. "Let's sit down, Olivia. Might as well make this official." "Make what? Official?" My heart started pounding. Harper followed us into the dining room where the table was already set for our roast chicken dinner. He placed the envelope deliberately in front of my place setting, like serving a subpoena alongside the silverware. My hand shook as I fumbled with the flap, tearing it open. The first page stared up at me, the heading in bold, stark letters: "Petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce papers." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, staring at the words, unable to process. My name as petitioner, though Richard's firm details were listed as counsel. His name as respondent. Allegations I didn't recognize. Financial disclosures I'd never seen. I didn't file for divorce, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Richard sat down opposite me, crossing one leg casually over the other. He took a long, slow sip of his Merlot, then looked at me as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "We know you didn't file, Olivia," he said, his voice infuriatingly patient. "We already decided this was the cleanest way. You just need to sign." "We? Decided?" My mouth went dry. I couldn't form a coherent thought. Then Margaret, seated at the head of the table like a benevolent queen presiding over an execution, leaned forward, placing her cool, manicured hand over mine. "It's for the best, dear," she murmured soothingly, her eyes, however, holding no warmth. "Just cooperate. Sign the papers. It will be so much easier for everyone, especially the children." For everyone? Easier? My mind snagged on the date typed neatly at the bottom of the petition. It wasn't today's date, it was dated 2 weeks ago. They had this drawn up, sitting somewhere, waiting for the right moment to spring it on me. While Margaret was staying here, helping out, while Richard was acting normally, if a bit distant, while I was making dinner, the cold fury started then, slow and deep, pushing past the initial shock. "Why?" The word came out small, tight. Richard shrugged, taking another sip of wine. "It just isn't working anymore, Olivia. Hasn't been for a while. You've been distracted lately. The kids are older now. It's time we both moved on." He said it so casually, like discussing the weather. "We agreed it's time?" I repeated, my voice rising despite myself. "When did we agree on this, Richard?" Was I asleep during that particular conversation? He didn't flinch. "There's someone else," he stated flatly, looking me directly in the eye now, almost challenging me. No shame, no apology, just a fact delivered like a line item on an invoice. Margaret nodded sympathetically. "These things happen, Olivia." The slap of his admission was sharp, but the next question clawed its way out of me, a question I dreaded but had to ask. Is she pregnant?" Richard didn't answer immediately. He studied the wine in his glass as if it held profound secrets. Then finally, a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Yes." The room swam again. Pregnant. He hadn't just been distant. He'd been living a whole other life. Margaret reached over and patted my hand again, that condescending, placating touch. "It's all right, dear. You've had your time with Richard, raised your family. You'll find your own path now. You just need to let go gracefully." Let go? Gracefully? Of 17 years? Of the home I'd managed, the children I'd raised almost single-handedly while he climbed the corporate ladder? Of the future I thought we were building? Let go like it was nothing? Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, but decisively. The shock subsided, replaced by an icy calm, a clarity sharpened by years of working as a paralegal, of noticing details, of understanding fine print. I remembered something. Something I had stumbled upon months ago, not years, while helping Richard organize files for a complex trust account case he'd brought home. A task he'd offloaded onto me because he was too swamped. I'd been sorting through digital folders, cross-referencing statements when I noticed anomalies. Transfers that didn't quite add up. Account numbers that seemed separate. Murky holding companies registered in jurisdictions known for secrecy. At the time, my paralegal brain flagged it as sloppy or potentially unethical, related perhaps to that specific client's affairs. I'd made discrete digital copies of the key documents, saved them in a deeply buried, password-protected folder on my personal cloud drive, labeled simply RB Trust Query. A paralegal's caution, a wife's nagging unease. I hadn't confronted him then, hadn't known what exactly I was looking at, attributing it perhaps to the complex, opaque world of corporate law he inhabited. But now, coupled with this pre-planned divorce, the affair, the pregnancy, the pieces clicked into place with horrifying certainty. This wasn't just about hiding assets from me in a divorce. This felt bigger, dirtier, like potential embezzlement, like fraud. I looked up from the divorce papers, my hands suddenly steady. Richard and Margaret were watching me, expecting tears, maybe hysterics, certainly capitulation. I offered them a small, tight smile instead, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "There's just one other file I need to review before I consider signing anything." I stood up, walked out of the dining room, leaving them exchanging confused, perhaps slightly alarmed glances. I went upstairs to my small home office, booted up my personal laptop, navigated through layers of security, and located the folder. RB Trust Query. Inside were the scanned documents, the spreadsheets tracing the anomalies, the evidence I had almost forgotten I possessed. My "oh hell no" file, indeed. I copied the key files onto a thumb drive, slipped it into my pocket, took a deep breath, and walked back downstairs, holding the small drive loosely in my hand. Time to flip the script. I walked back into the dining room, the small USB drive feeling solid and cool in my palm. The air was thick with tension. Richard, Margaret, and the lawyer, Daniel Harper, all looked up as I entered, their expressions a mixture of impatience and wary curiosity. Richard had regained some of his composure, leaning back with a semblance of his usual arrogance, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Margaret watched me with narrowed eyes, her posture rigid. Harper looked like he just wanted this awkward house call to be over. I didn't sit down immediately. Instead, I walked over to my laptop, which was still open on the sideboard from when I'd been looking up a recipe earlier. "Mr. Harper," I began, my voice calm and measured, addressing the lawyer directly, ignoring my husband and mother-in-law for the moment. "Before we delve further into this petition, perhaps your legal expertise could shed some light on a related financial matter I recently came across." Harper looked surprised, glancing uncertainly at Richard. "Related matter, Mrs. Bennett?" "Yes," I said, plugging the USB drive into the laptop. While assisting my husband with organizing some files pertaining to the Sterling client trust account he manages, purely administrative, you understand, I noticed certain discrepancies. I opened the folder I'd labeled RB Trust Query. Specifically, a series of rather opaque transfers routed through shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands, coinciding rather interestingly with several large, undocumented personal expenditures. I clicked open a spreadsheet I had created, tracing the anomalies. As a paralegal, these patterns naturally raised some flags regarding fiduciary duty and potential misappropriation of client funds. I'm sure you understand the ethical implications. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I saw Harper's professional mask crack. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as he scanned the headings on the spreadsheet visible on my screen. He wasn't just witnessing a messy divorce anymore. He was potentially witnessing evidence of serious professional misconduct, maybe even criminal activity. His own license could be on the line if he was seen to be facilitating a divorce intended to obscure such dealings. He stood up abruptly, gathering his briefcase with jerky movements. "Mrs. Bennett, Mr. Bennett," he stammered, his earlier smoothness completely gone. "Given this new information, I believe there may be a potential conflict of interest. I strongly advise both parties to seek separate, independent counsel. My firm will need to withdraw representation immediately pending further review. I I will see myself out." He practically fled the room, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. The power dynamic shifted instantly. Richard shot to his feet, his face contorted with rage. "Olivia, what the hell do you think you're doing? Those are confidential client files. You have no right." "Confidential enough to hide from the IRS, Richard? Confidential enough to hide from me while you plan to discard me?" "I made copies while fulfilling the spousal duty of helping you organize," I replied coolly, meeting his glare. "And they are securely backed up elsewhere, naturally. A good paralegal always keeps backups." "She's bluffing," he snarled, turning to his mother. "She doesn't know what she's talking about." But Margaret wasn't looking at him. She was staring at me, her expression unreadable, perhaps finally realizing her golden boy wasn't as pristine as she believed, or maybe just furious that my actions had derailed their neat little plan. "Olivia," she began, her voice low and menacing, "you will regret this." "I doubt it," I said softly. "Now, if you'll both excuse me, my chicken is getting cold." The days that followed were thick with a tense, suffocating silence. Margaret retreated into martyred sighs and pointedly helpful gestures that felt more like accusations. Richard oscillated between stony silence, attempts at gaslighting. "You completely misunderstood those trust documents, Olivia. They're perfectly standard complex structures." And even one pathetic attempt at faux concern. "Are you feeling okay? Remember that panic attack? Maybe the stress is getting to you?" I ignored them both, focusing on quietly consulting divorce lawyers, real ones, sharp, experienced women recommended by contacts from my firm, and securing my personal finances. The next blow came disguised as innocuous school correspondence. An email forwarded from the high school guidance office, a formal request submitted by Richard to transfer both Emily and Jake to an exclusive boarding school in Virginia, citing family relocation and better academic opportunities. Effective immediately, he hadn't just planned to divorce me and take the house, he planned to take the children, removing them from their home, their friends, their school, without a word to me. The audacity, the cruelty, it took my breath away. This time, my paralegal training kicked into high gear. Within an hour, I was at the high school principal's office, armed with copies of our existing joint custody agreement, proof of Maryland residency, the unsigned divorce petition, which clearly showed I hadn't agreed to any relocation, and a brief, factual letter outlining Richard's unilateral action. The principal, thankfully a reasonable woman, was appalled. She assured me no transfer would proceed without a court order or my explicit notarized consent. Richard's attempt was dead on arrival. That evening, I confronted him. The kids were home, doing homework in the living room, close enough to hear. "You tried to transfer the kids out of state without my knowledge or consent, Richard?" I stated, keeping my voice level despite the fury simmering beneath. He didn't deny it, just resorted to bluster. "I was securing their future. That school offers connections, opportunities." "Our children," I cut him off sharply. "You don't get to unilaterally decide their future, especially not while trying to secretly divorce their mother." "What did you plan to tell them? That I'd agreed?" Emily looked up from her history textbook, her eyes wide, catching the undercurrent. Jake paused his video game. They weren't stupid. They knew things were wrong. Richard saw their expressions and faltered, his usual confidence evaporating under the weight of their silent judgment. He retreated, muttering something about needing to make a call. The final piece arrived a few days later, not from a lawyer or the school, but from an unknown number via text. "Is this Olivia Bennett, Richard's wife? My name is Rachel Miller. I think we need to talk." My blood ran cold. Rachel. The other woman. The pregnant one. I hesitated, then agreed to meet her for coffee the next day at a neutral cafe downtown. She was younger, maybe late 30s, professionally dressed, visibly nervous but with intelligent eyes, and, I noted with a strange mix of relief and renewed anger at Richard's manipulative depths, clearly not pregnant. "He told me you'd been separated for years," Rachel said quietly after we ordered, her voice trembling slightly. "That the divorce was just a formality he was finalizing. He said you were amicable, but distant." She took a shaky breath. "We were talking about a future together. He mentioned wanting kids soon. Then last week, after things apparently blew up at your house, he became evasive. I did some digging online, found recent photos of you two at a charity event looking very much married. Then I found your work profile." She met my eyes. "He lied. About everything." We talked for over an hour, compared timelines, stories, the specific lies Richard had spun to keep us both in the dark. She hadn't known about the pregnancy claim he'd made to me, another manipulation. He had apparently also used his legal position to subtly entangle her professionally, making her feel obligated. She was furious, disillusioned, and wanted out, but also worried about potential professional blowback he might orchestrate. "I'm not pregnant," she confirmed again, bitterness in her voice. "That was clearly just another tool for him to use against you. We weren't friends, not even close. But in that moment we were unlikely allies, united by the duplicity of the same man." She agreed to provide a statement, share any relevant emails or texts if it came to it. She wanted him exposed as much as I did. I walked out of the coffee shop feeling strangely energized. The initial shock of the ambush dinner had transformed into focused determination. Richard thought he was playing chess, moving his pieces strategically for a clean win. He didn't realize I'd been studying the board too. He thought he was dealing with a simple housewife he could easily discard. He forgot I was a paralegal. He forgot I knew how to read the fine print, follow the money, and build a case. The script had flipped, and now I had the evidence, I had an ally, and I was ready to write my own ending. The gloves were off. Armed with the damning evidence from Richard's own files and the corroborating, angry testimony of Rachel Miller, I felt like a different person. The shock and vulnerability I'd felt during that ambush dinner had been replaced by a cold, clear focus. I wasn't just a wife blindsided. I was a paralegal with evidence of potential felonies and serious ethical breaches committed by my husband. My path forward wasn't about saving the marriage. That was clearly unsalvageable. It was about protecting myself, protecting my children, and ensuring Richard faced the consequences of his actions. I hired Jessica Harding, a divorce attorney whose reputation for meticulous preparation and courtroom tenacity was legendary in the DC area. In our first meeting, I laid out everything: the ambush dinner, the pre-dated divorce petition, Richard's admission of the affair, the attempt to transfer the kids, the offshore account folder, now labeled Client Trust Anomalies, and Rachel Miller's statement detailing Richard's lies and manipulations. Jessica listened intently, her expression growing increasingly grim as I detailed the financial irregularities I'd uncovered in the Sterling Trust account files. "This goes far beyond marital infidelity, Olivia," she said finally, tapping the printouts of the suspicious transfers. "If these records indicate what I think they indicate, embezzlement or severe mismanagement of client trust funds, Richard isn't just facing divorce court, he's facing potential disbarment, lawsuits, possibly even criminal investigation." We formulated a strategy, swift, decisive, and utterly by the book. First, the divorce filing. "He tried to serve you discreetly at home," Jessica said, a glint in her eye. "We'll serve him publicly, at his office. Let his colleagues see the petition firsthand." Second, the ethical complaints. "We file for divorce first," she advised. "Then Once he's been served and knows you're playing hardball, we submit a detailed, documented complaint regarding the trust fund mismanagement to the Maryland State Bar. We simultaneously explore options for alerting the potentially affected client and relevant financial authorities. We use the leverage. The day the process server delivered my petition to Richard at the entrance of his gleaming downtown Bethesda law firm was, according to my friend Sarah, who worked nearby and provided a gleeful eyewitness account via text, quite the spectacle. Richard, apparently exiting a meeting with senior partners, was visibly stunned, his face turning ashen as he accepted the papers in front of colleagues. The mask of the untouchable corporate lawyer had slipped, publicly. As predicted, Richard's initial reaction was bluster and threats via his own hastily hired attorney. But Jessica Harding calmly countered every move, presenting preliminary evidence of the financial irregularities during initial filings, making it clear we weren't just alleging infidelity, but potentially far more serious misconduct. Simultaneously, as planned, I filed the formal complaint with the state bar, attaching copies of the suspicious trust account statements, transfer records, and shell company details I had meticulously documented. I also, after consulting with Jessica, drafted a carefully worded anonymous tip to the state's financial regulatory body. This wasn't just about marital assets anymore. It was about professional ethics, about protecting potential victims of Richard's financial maneuvering. As a paralegal, I felt an ethical obligation to report it, separate from my personal anger. Back home, the atmosphere was icy but quiet. Margaret, Richard's mother, realizing her son was in serious trouble and her influence over me was gone, packed her bags and left for Florida within a week, leaving behind only a short, bitter note accusing me of being vengeful and handling things poorly. I didn't bother responding. Her departure felt like lancing a boil. The most difficult part was talking to Emily and Jake. I sat them down, explained calmly that Dad and I were getting divorced, that it wasn't their fault, and that sometimes adults make choices that break trust in ways that can't be fixed. I didn't burden them with the details of the affair or the potential embezzlement, but I did tell them truthfully about Dad trying to transfer them to the Virginia school without my knowledge. That resonated. They had felt his distance, his preoccupation, his lack of engagement in their lives for months. "He didn't even ask us if we wanted to go," Emily said quietly, her voice full of hurt. Jake just nodded, his jaw tight. When Richard tried to plead his case to them during his first supervised visitation, a measure Jessica insisted on, given the school incident, they were polite, but distant. They made their choice clear. They wanted to stay with me, in our home, in their school, with their friends. Their quiet solidarity was my anchor. The legal and professional fallout for Richard was swift and brutal. His firm, facing potential liability and reputational damage from the looming bar investigation into the trust fund, placed him on indefinite leave, then quietly terminated his partnership. The bar investigation proceeded, slow but thorough. Rumors circulated. Clients became wary. The powerful network he had cultivated began to distance itself. Rachel Miller provided a formal statement to my lawyer about his misrepresentations, which further damaged his credibility. The divorce itself became almost secondary to Richard's professional implosion. Faced with irrefutable evidence of financial misconduct presented by Jessica during discovery, and the clear preference of the children, Richard's legal team quickly sought a settlement. The terms were overwhelmingly in my favor. I retained full physical custody of Emily and Jake, and ownership of the family home free and clear. The legitimate marital assets were divided according to the prenup and state law. Crucially, the court acknowledged the evidence of the hidden funds, freezing those accounts pending further investigation by the bar and potential action by the affected client or authorities, ensuring they couldn't simply be dissolved or disappear. Richard left the final hearing looking like a ghost, his arrogance replaced by a hollow shell. He had tried to orchestrate a clean, quiet exit from our marriage, leaving me emotionally and perhaps financially compromised while he started a new life. Instead, his own deceit, arrogance, and potential crimes had brought his world crashing down. Life after the divorce wasn't easy, but it was mine. The house felt quieter, calmer. Emily and Jake, relieved to be out from under the cloud of tension, began to thrive again. I returned to my paralegal work full-time at the estate planning firm, finding satisfaction in the meticulous work, the clear rules, the ethical application of the law that Richard had so blatantly disregarded. I reconnected with old friends, started exploring my own interests again, hiking trails along the Potomac, visiting museums in D.C., finally reading the stack of books that had gathered dust on my nightstand for years. I heard snippets about Richard through mutual acquaintances, facing likely disbarment, potential lawsuits, struggling financially. I felt no satisfaction, no desire for further revenge, just a quiet, profound sense of relief that the chaos was no longer mine to manage. Rachel Miller sent me a brief email months later saying she'd had her baby girl and was focusing on her career, wishing me well. I wished her the same. We were two women untangling ourselves from the wreckage he'd created. Sometimes, usually on quiet Wednesday evenings when I'm making dinner for the kids, I think back to that night the lawyer arrived. I remember the shock, the fear, but mostly, I remember the cold clarity that followed, the moment I retrieved that folder. The moment I decided to fight back not with hysterics, but with facts. I made mistakes in my marriage, stayed silent for too long, ignored red flags because I wanted to believe in the illusion. But in the end, I found my voice. I found my strength. And I built a new foundation, one based not on pretense, but on the quiet, unshakable bedrock of self-respect.